Anya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this is the continuation of the first seminar. So we are at this transition point where we kind of gathered some background, some big picture of the different approaches, and basically we are collecting the basic ingredients to enter into cosmology section of the Srimad Bhagavatam. That's what we are doing in the first part. So Vaikuntanath Prabhu, right? So can you tell me if you can hear? This is better? Okay. 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 Yeah, let me know. If you let me know, then I'll try to adjust. So the basic text that we all study as part of Bhakti Shastri, and I think everybody studies Bhagavad Gita, right? First, before getting into Srimad Bhagavatam. And I want to show you an example of how scientific Bhagavad Gita is, and it actually sets the correct platform to understand some of these finer concepts in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So I will close this point that I mentioned one thing, that the reality is conceptual, it's not physical, right? So some devotees are a little bit alarmed. So I'll explain that a little bit in detail what that means. So we have this wonderful verse, 7th chapter, 2nd verse. Jnanam teham savijnanam idam vakshyami asheshataha yajgatvaneha bhuyanya ajgatavyam avashishyate. If you read the translation given by Srila Prabhupada, he has these two terminologies he has used. One is phenomenal knowledge. What is Jnanam is translated as phenomenal knowledge. Phenomenal knowledge means knowledge of observable phenomena, right? We observe so many phenomena, so knowledge about that is phenomenal knowledge. But he has also coined this term called luminous knowledge. I always wonder how could Prabhupada come up with this word, luminous knowledge. For Vijnana, he is translated as luminous knowledge. What is...
Sorry, just to add, if you can go to 11th canto, 19th chapter, 15th verse.
Uh-huh.
It's amazing how Krishna defines Vijnana. It's so much in line with what is told.
So is it in the shloka book?
11.9.15.
11.19.
I don't know if it is there, but it's amazing. Just to add, I didn't mean to divert it.
Okay.
We can do it later.
Yes, okay. Yeah, it may not be here. So we'll come back, we'll refer to it later. Numinous knowledge. So numinous knowledge means knowledge of the reality underlying observable phenomena. So observable phenomena, knowledge of that is the first layer. But beneath that, at a deeper level, is the numinous knowledge, and that's Vijnana. So when we understand Vijnana, we actually understand things as they are, to understand the phenomena as they are. So it's important to distinguish between the two, and we'll see why that is important. So, what is science about? What is physics or all sciences about? So there's some unsaid, assumed background that goes into all kind of descriptions. So if we can just say the study of the objects in the phenomenal world is what constitutes science, right? We're studying, let's say, a table. Let's say we're studying a chair, or we're studying something. So we're studying the objects that we see around us. So can you tell me what you see here in this picture? Toys. Okay, cupboard or shelf. Pictures, flowers. Text. Flower vase on the top. Okay. Wooden floor. wall, objects. So everybody is listing different objects, right? Does anybody see the space in which the objects exist? Do you see it? But do you think there is some space? Assumed? Right. So there is actually some space, right? Like a room. There's some depth to this figure, right? And then there are objects placed in different locations in this space. The space is kind of unsaid, given thing. We don't really think about it, but we just assume it's there, and then we talk about the object. But technically, before studying the object, the space in which they are defined, the space in which they exist must be defined, right? Unless we are clear about the space, then I don't know what. Then the next layer of study about the objects can be misleading, right? So do you agree with that? The space must be defined. So I just looked up Wikipedia. What is space? There's only one definition of space. Space is boundless three-dimensional extent in which objects and events have relative position and direction. So that's what space is ordinarily thought of as, right? And then all sciences, they are actually, this is a starting point for space. So in modern context, the space is physical or visual, right? The space is something that our eyes see, the length, width, depth, three-dimensional space. So we can call it physical, or it's basically visual. And the property of visual space is length or distance. But the Bhagavad Gita tells us that the space is not physical. So, shariram yad avapnoti yad chapya utkramat ishvaraha gruhitva itani samyati vayur gandhan ivashayad. So here the description about how the living entity is moving from one body to the next, right? As the air carries aromas, that's the example is given. And later on in the next verse, Lord Krishna says, Shrotram chakshu sparshanam cha rasanam granam evacha adhisthaya manaschayam vishayan upasevate. So the senses, he's talking about the five senses, right? The five senses are grouped about the mind, and by that arrangement, we are enjoying a certain particular set of sense objects. So I want to ask you a couple of questions. So what does the body consist of? What does our gross body consist of? Okay. Organs. Again, it's senses, right? Senses. Isn't it? What is important in our body are the senses, right? The eyes, ears, sense of touch, sense of smell, sense of taste, and so on. So we have these senses, right? And with the senses we are perceiving the world, right? Where is the mind? Let me ask this question. Where is the mind? Can you give a location for the mind? In the heart? In the brain? No location? Floating location? All over the body? Yeah, we cannot restrict the mind to the body, right? Yes. Right, because mind can travel to India tomorrow. So, is there a location for mind somewhere? Heart? What do you mean by mind? Good question. Good question. The senses are grouped about the mind. It's not the other way around. So, the answer is that the mind does not exist in the physical space. So, mind exists in a space of its own, and that space can be called as conceptual space. So, thoughts, you have thoughts, right? You think. So, the thoughts, feelings, willing. So, these are the three functions of the mind. So, these are happening, right? These are very real. We experience them. But we cannot give any particular location. My thought is over here right now, next is moving there right now, or that basically is irrelevant, right? The physical space is irrelevant when you come to talk of the mind. So the mind does exist, mind is real, it's an energy of the Lord, but it exists in a space, and we coin this term called conceptual space. Why conceptual space? Because mind deals with concepts. Right? If I tell you something, you're able to understand that. Why? Because in my mind, I have a concept, I speak it out, your mind catches the concept, and you understand it, you assimilate it, right? So we are exchanging concepts, and the mind is involved in this process. So the mind does exist in the conceptual space, it does not exist in the physical space. But now, if we talked about the senses, we think the senses is existing here, right? I can point to my eyes, I can point to my mouth, I can point to my body. So that means senses seem to be existing in the physical space, whereas mind has no physical location. But the Bhagavad Gita says the senses are grouped about the mind. So how can something in the physical realm be grouped about something that's not in the physical realm? It exists in the conceptual realm. How does that connection ever take place? Good, you're catching everything.
When we think of sense organs, but sense is different from sense.
Very nice. You had your hand, Prabhu? Subtle senses also. So actually these words are very technical. The Shrotram, please use the microphone when you're speaking. Shrotram, Chakshuhu, Sparshanam, Rasanam, Grahanam. These are technical words in Sanskrit. They are translated to as eyes, ears. But actually what they mean is the sense of touch or sense of vision is different from the eyeball. We think the eyes are the eyeball, but the sense of vision is manifest through the eyeball, and we think we are seeing through the eyes which we can touch. But the sense of vision is existing in a subtle realm, and it's connected to the mind in the conceptual realm. But it's manifest in this space, in the physical space, through what we see as the sense organs. But what Bhagavad Gita is talking about is not the sense organs. It's talking about the sense within. And these senses are grouped about the mind. These senses are collecting information from the world and feeding into the mind, and the mind makes sense of this information. Mind gets an idea about what's going on. So, if we want to be technical and we really want to take this to the next level, then we have to conclude that the senses exist in conceptual space as well. Right? That means our body, which we think is a collection of senses, is actually not in the physical space as such. It's actually existing in the conceptual realm, but it is manifest. It has some manifestation in the physical realm. But when the mind and intelligence get so absorbed into physical things and physical space, then we are totally identifying ourselves with physical nature of reality. Okay, so but the senses are in the conceptual realm. Please use a microphone.
Are you saying that a blind man also has a sense of sight?
No, that's not what I'm saying. The blind man is blind because his sense of vision has been withdrawn. He may have eyeballs, everything may be perfect in terms of biological constitution, but he may not be able to see. The reason for that is the sense of vision has been withdrawn.
But you're saying that it's independent of the physical eye. Seeing is independent of the physical eye.
That's right. So even if a person who is blind can see if his sense of vision has been brought in. And we have many examples of that in the scripture. So they seem to be related, and it's not incorrect to say that they are related. So, but it's a subtle distinction. So being blind and having eyes to see, they're two different things.
To me, it seems like a blind man has some physical defect. That's the reason he can't.
Yeah, that's what we perceive, because we attribute that the reason for blindness must be physical, right? That's our assumption, or that's the idea that we have. Then, of course, when we investigate, we'll find something. Oh, this is because of this. He's blind. He's not able to see. right? But the actual thing is that the sense of vision, which is grouped about the mind, can be manifest or can be unmanifest. When it is withdrawn, then you cannot see anymore, even if everything is perfect. And when it is allowed to manifest, even if things are imperfect on a physical plane, the person will be able to see.
So what you're saying is there is just seeing, there is no seer, there is no sense of vision, there is just seeing, the perception itself.
No, the sense of vision is there. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Sense of vision is there, and that we're distinguishing from the eyeball. We're distinguishing that. Okay? Many questions.
One
Guruji,
question.
We read that it's yantra rudhani maya, right? We work through the yantra. So we always understand that we are inside the yantra. Now your concept of conceptual space kind of defies that concept, because you're saying conceptual space does not define its boundaries in physical space. It's like two different planes. I'm in a different plane and I'm viewing from a different plane. My ability to view is not at the plane in which I'm viewing. I'm gathering the information and I'm understanding it in a different plane. If that is the case, then this shlokam which says yantra rudhani maya, I am using the body as an instrument in which to experience the world, doesn't it define me into the space of the instrument? I have to be in the instrument to experience it, right?
We are in this, we have assumed this instrument, and I mean the eyes, ears, the senses that we're talking about is not the soul, right? It's still external to the soul. So that's part of the yantra that we're talking about.
So it exists in a space that is not necessarily the physical space of the body.
That's right.
But it's still in a controlled space.
It is restricted. Its motion is restricted.
Restricted.
Yeah,
Okay.
you cannot do whatever you want.
I mean, I cannot see Beijing. I'm sitting here.
Exactly. So even in existing in the conceptual realm, you cannot see or boundlessly, or you cannot do whatever you want, because conceptual space is something abstract. But even conceptual space, dealings in conceptual space, there are rules, there are laws to go about.
Wow.
So we are limited in our sense, in all senses of perception.
I have one question, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Taking that blind man example further, I really liked how you're separating physical and conceptual. We do see people who are blind by birth, just by the physical act of replacing their eyeballs or putting eyeballs, seem to give them vision. We don't know whether what they're seeing is what we are seeing, of course, but how do you explain that?
Okay, so this discussion I don't want to get too much into right now. Is that okay? Sorry. Because I know that your mind will always come up with controversies. But there is a consistent way to explain it, and I'll try to explain later on. But do you all get the idea? Do you all get the idea that the senses are in the conceptual realm? So technically speaking, the body is in a conceptual realm. Okay? Along with the mind, yes.
I didn't understand. Sorry.
You didn't understand the whole thing. So we understand physical space, right? Physical space is three-dimensional, it's visual, we can perceive depth, 3 dimensions, right? And we always tend to think that this space is it. So we need to describe this space, study objects in this space, and so on. And that's what is actually very natural to do, right? To do something otherwise is unnatural for one who has no touch with Vedic scriptures. So the only reason we are able to think of anything other than that is because we are in touch with Vedic scriptures, because we are in touch with Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. So the idea here is, so I try to have a flow for the logic. So that's why I asked you, where is the gross body? Can you point? What is the gross body consisting of? I think there was some answer about earth, water, fire, but those are the elements of which assist in formation of the gross body. But actually the body means really the senses, because without senses you cannot do anything. So gross body consists of senses. And then the question is, where is the mind? Can you give a physical location to the mind? Physical space is actually irrelevant as far as the mind's function are concerned. And then we have this beautiful verse in the Bhagavad Gita, which says the senses are grouped about the mind. That means the Bhagavad Gita is not talking about the organs. The senses that is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita are something that is connected to the mind. If physical has nothing to do with conceptual, then there can be no connection. So the conclusion is the senses that Bhagavad Gita is talking about must be in the conceptual realm.
Can we define mind? Because I'm still unclear of what you mean.
Okay,
by
we don't
mind.
need to define mind. We can just, practical level, we can just say, you have thoughts, right?
Yes.
So those thoughts exist in mind. So that's the practical definition of mind. Mind is the realm of reality which you experience, in which thoughts occur.
What about, so how do these thoughts interact with memory, the physical memory?
Yeah, I don't want to get too much along these lines. So, but do you understand mind, what I mean by a simple...
You're saying the thought sphere is the mind.
Is included in the mind. The memory, similarly, is included in the mind.
Memory is physical, right? It goes with the body. Isn't it?
No.
That's the reason people with brain damage, they can't remember.
So again, same question as him. So mind, yeah, your intelligence will come up with controversies, and I know these are difficult to resolve, but I don't think in the next half an hour, if I keep describing, we'll be able to resolve. So that's why I don't want to get sidetracked. But these are very valid questions, though. So don't take me wrong. But we can take this offline, and I can try to explain later. Yes, Mataji.
You don't have to answer it now, but at some point, if you can address that, we talk about conceptual things like fear, and then we also talk about fear personified. So, what does that mean? Like that person, a personality, what is it made up of, and things like that. I don't want to sidetrack.
Fear personified. Okay, let's save this question for later. Maybe somebody can write the questions which we are not answering right now, so that we don't forget. Mukharvind Prabhu can help with that. Okay. So by the end of the seminars, I at least want to attempt addressing all the questions. Yes, Prabhu. Turn it on. Can you turn it on?
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So Prabhu, you mentioned that what we are just physically perceiving is just perception, but reality is conceptual, right?
So I didn't get to the physical distinction yet, but I will get that next. But I'm trying to give you a feel for what conceptual space means.
Yes, I just, it's a clarification. I want to know what is the premise we are operating in. So, so there are the sense objects, so which are like the eyeballs and all of these, to see the physical reality around us. And behind that, in the hierarchy.
Bhagavatam doesn't describe sense objects like that. Sense object understanding is totally very different. You may be talking about sense organs.
Yes,
yeah.
yes, that's
okay.
what I meant. So behind these sense organs, there are the sense objects. Sorry, not the sense objects. The subtle senses, and behind that is the mind, and behind that is the intelligence. In the chariot analogy, I am just trying to see how it...
yeah, the chariot analogy actually doesn't touch the physical space. The chariot analogy, the senses that you're talking about, the horses, they're talking about those senses that we just mentioned here. So let me put it this way. So because we are absorbed into thinking of the body like this and organs, right? So for a moment, try to let go of that kind of impression that you have. Let's try to come the other way around. Let's start with the mind. We know mind is real, right? We all can feel its presence. So the senses with which we are perceiving the world are connected to the mind, and the function of the senses is to gather information from the world and feed it to the mind. The mind makes sense of it, right? So let's come the other way around. And now these senses are manifest in the physical realm in the form of sense organs. Okay, so if you come from the other way around, then the organs, what the function of the organs is it becomes clear. But if you try to start from the organs, then because organs are in the physical space, And now if you talk about the sense within, how do you make that jump from physical to the conceptual realm? That becomes very difficult logically or philosophically. You cannot make that jump. So therefore, those who start physically, they remain in physical realm. You can never make that jump. Yeah, we can have lot of evidence. Actually, I'm going to give you a simple example to try to understand this. You have another question?
So, no, Prabhu, this one only. I always thought that it's the soul who is conscious and mind is not conscious. So, when you say that the sense of perception ultimately rests in the mind, so that's kind of implying that the mind is conscious.
So in the Bhagavad Gita, 18th chapter, or no? So, have you heard this term, contaminated consciousness? It appears in the Bhagavad Gita. We may have to look it up.
Yes, but the concept is, yes.
Yeah, so what is this contaminated consciousness? This contaminated consciousness is the consciousness of the soul reflected in matter, which is mind. So like think of it as a light bulb, and it's covered with colored paper. So what you see coming out is red light, right? But the original source of light is not red, but it's coming through a layer and it appears to be red. So this red light is compared to contaminated consciousness. And the bulb is like the soul. So the origin of the consciousness is the soul, but it is being perceived through a layer of matter, which comes as contaminated consciousness. So in that sense, mind and intelligence appear to have properties of consciousness because they are surrounding the soul, because they are covering the soul. Without the soul, mind as such will have no consciousness. I mean, again, we need to be careful with this concept because you cannot separate the mind from the soul in the conditioned state.
So it's like viewing different realities, so to speak, because if somebody is viewing what is outside the colored paper, then they'll see it differently. Let's say an external observer is present and is viewing the light outside the paper, then it will appear in a different color, but the light within the paper is in a different color, and then
No. So let's not confuse. Suppose we are just seeing, you're talking about the consciousness in the mind, right? So let's just talk about the bulb and the paper example. So let's say we're just looking at the light coming out. I have no access to the bulb, the original bulb. So all I see is red light. So that is the consciousness of the mind that I'm able to see. Consciousness reflected in mind. But the source of consciousness is the light bulb or the soul. So it appears that the mind is conscious. Yes, that is a fact. In fact, unless we are self-realized, that is all that we see.
What do you mean by mind is conscious?
That's what I'm explaining.
Yeah.
The red light analogy. So the red light that we see is also light, but it's not in its original form.
What is its original form?
The example, imagine a light bulb covered with red paper, right? So I'm able to see red light. I don't see the original white source of light. So what we are seeing, what we are experiencing, the realm of consciousness is the reflection of the soul's original energy, the consciousness in matter. So it appears as red light. It appears as contaminated consciousness. So the consciousness that we experience is at the level of mind and intelligence. So they do appear to be conscious, yes.
But the physical world in reality, does it exist or not?
Let's go on. Let's keep moving. I will give you a very nice example. It becomes very visual and explanatory. Can wait or not? Cannot wait? Adding on that? Okay, let's hear the question. I may answer it a little later.
Very good class, Prabhuji. One thing which I am seeing is science, with the evolution of science, actually this whole space, no space thing is getting evolved in good part. Especially when we are talking about say, so far we were used to of 2D, which was okay, but when all this, virtual reality and all those things are coming, people are seeing that it doesn't exist, but people are believing on it. So at some point of time when we are, say, if I give an example, if we are looking in one dimension, it will, if it's a line, it will appear like a dot. If you move to 2 dimension, it will look like a line. If you go into a 3 dimension, it will have a length, breadth and width, correct? So the perception which our current senses are registering is dependent on the dimensions which we are actually used to. So when this whole learning augmented reality is coming, the whole space concept, instead of working on a laptop which is 2-dimensional, when it is 3-dimensional, people are able to transport themselves and all. It's becoming very different, very difficult. Sorry, I'm throwing some tangents out there, but basically the whole presence, what is physical presence, is scientists himself or themselves are also now questioning about it. So it's actually in a slow progression towards what you said, an elephant balancing and all. We cannot perceive it in the beginning, but maybe those dimensions are not present into, if a dog can understand an earthquake is coming and we cannot, it's not because that signal was not there, we were not able to process those signals. So I'll just say that, as you said, faith is a connection. We have enough, and then also there are signs like Heisenberg uncertainty principle, where it says if you can measure the accuracy of a space or location, the velocity gets compromised. And if you look into the velocity, the space, the exact location. So science has its own limitation of measurement and observation. And one last part I'll say is the whole quantum theory, atomic theory, when we are talking about it, says whether it's a Bohr's model or a Rutherford model, nobody has actually seen when particles are hitting the gold plate and the electrons are, these are all seen to be models, or a benzene structure that the carbon and hydrogen atoms are actually touching each other like a snake. These are all imagination, and then we believe that as organic chemistry base. We believe as quantum theory, quantum, the Planck's constant, H is equal to the value, was something which Planck got in a dream. So even axioms exist on that side itself. So thank you, Prabhu. I just wanted to say that the space part is evolving eventually, slowly, on the same aspect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu. Looks like you're reading high school physics these days. Can I go forward? Okay. Anirban Prabhu had comment or question? Comment, okay.
So Prabhu, thanks for the nice class. So you were mentioning about the space. So we know that mind is actually in the subtle body, right? So it means that the subtle body has its own, like a physical body has a space and breadth and all. Yeah. Subtle body has similar length and
its own space of existence. Okay. That's right. That's the point. And then I'm making the point that the senses are actually grouped about the mind. So the senses that we think about are not the sense organs. The Bhagavad Gita is talking about the senses which are grouped about the mind. So they must be in the
subtle body.
They must be connected to the subtle body. Okay. They are counted as part of the gross body, but they are connected to the subtle body in the conceptual
map. They make the connection from the physical body to the subtle body. Okay.
Again, don't bring the word physical because I'll explain. Okay, so here is just one, is a side note. It's not really important to get into this into a lot of detail, but there is a thing called Cartesian Dualism. So the Western philosophers are very, very, very smart. They're very clever. Okay, so let's not underestimate the extent to which they can think. So very early on, this person, philosopher called Descartes, he realized this, that mind is actually not in the physical realm. I can feel it, but really I cannot give it a location. So it's not in the physical realm. But my body is physical. I cannot deny it. right? This is where the difference comes. Touch with scriptures, no touch with scriptures. You're forced to adopt this thinking that the body is physical. Now he asks the question, if body is physical, mind is not physical, how is the connection made? How is the connection happening? This is called the mind-body problem. Okay, so that's what I just mentioned. How does the mind and body causally interact? Because we think of something, the next moment we are doing it, right, with our hands. And then if we do something, that will trigger some chain of thoughts. So how is this communication happening? But we just talked about. Anyway, let's focus on the problem here. So he said, it's. How is it? How is the connection going on? How is it happening? So this is called a mind-body problem, and it's in philosophy. It's actually an unsolved problem for more than 2,000 years. So there are different alternatives which have been proposed. So people have come up with saying that matter is everything and mind is a derivative. Or they say mind is everything but matter is an illusion. Or mind and matter are both derivatives and the fundamental reality is something different, something unknown. So different propositions to solve this problem. Do you all understand the problem? Philosophical problem? And then these are the proposed solutions. So science has taken that approach. That matter is everything, mind is a derivative. And that's why when Manjula Kanta Mataji says neurons, then I know she has subscribed to science. We all have, unknowingly or knowingly. Okay, it's so well penetrated into the society that you cannot really avoid it. So science has taken that approach. Matter is everything, and they actually try to explain everything else in terms of the matter, the functions in the matter. So when I was at IBM, they may still have this project going on, but they had a project with a very fancy name. Engineering the mind by reverse engineering the brain. Okay, so they're basically trying to make a computer which is almost like human mind. I think it's still going on. They're working very hard at it. But the real solution is in the Bhagavad Gita, and all these propositions are wrong. They're not right. So let's talk about objects in conceptual space. So I give you some figures. Can you tell me everything looks okay? Doesn't look okay?
Yes, looks okay.
Looks perfect, right? Cricket ball next to bangles. Cricket bat next to bangles. Cricket ball next to earrings. Doesn't look okay? I think I tried to separate them by some space here, right? that was the idea. But the actual pairing should have been like this, right? So when I mean by conceptual space, what do I mean? Objects in conceptual space are positioned and grouped by their meaning. They are grouped by their meaning. Okay? So we have positions for objects in physical space, and you have 3D coordinate system to position them. But that's not how you position objects in conceptual space. You position them by their meaning. And actually your mind does an amazing job at grouping objects, but it does it by meaning. The mind is the most amazing thing in this creation, in my opinion. So Western philosophy neglects the importance of meaning in the study of the world, because they are rooted in matter. They want to just study objects at the physical level. They cannot really comprehend of studying meaning in a scientific manner. So although everybody is doing meaningful things, right? Even the scientists are trying to do something meaningful, but they actually don't understand, or they don't fully appreciate the importance of meaning in the study of science. They're trying to do something meaningful, but they neglect the importance of meaning. The world is a meaningful place. Is it or not? Yes. Do our lives have meaning? Yeah, they do. So therefore we are searching for meaning, and from meaning comes happiness. So if you are able to find something meaningful, if you have a meaningful relationship, if you have meaningful reciprocation, if you have a meaningful, like a thing that somebody has given you a gift, then it makes you happy, right? So from meaning comes happiness. And because of this problem of treating the world physically, which basically try to treat it devoid of meaning, the world seems to be a miserable place of suffering. So many scientists will say that, we are just describing nature as it is. What is my fault? Right? So, but their fault is in the way they look at the world. If the perspective of the world is pretty much inferior, or it's pretty much devoid of meaning, then you can never find any means to happiness. So no matter how much we advance technologically and so on. So now let's take this example. So the premise here is that the world is conceptual. It's not a physical world that we are dealing with, and the purpose here is the idea here is to illustrate this. So when you look at this object on the right, and you start thinking what it is. So first of all, let's identify the object. It's a table. So how do you know it's a table? What? You've seen that before? Based on previous experience? Do all say that, previous experience?
Yeah, somebody told us that anything looks like that.
Anything that looks like that is a table?
It matches with our concept of a table.
It's what?
Right? It matches with the concept.
Okay, very nice. Most accurate answer. So what a table is actually an embodiment of the idea table. Because without an idea of table, you cannot make a table. Right? If you want to tell anybody to make a table, you need to convey your idea. But the idea's origin is in the mind. It's not in the physical realm. It's in the conceptual realm. But that idea is translated into something that is now perceivable with the senses, and that appears to be physical. So that which appears to be, which is perceivable by the senses, that is what appears to be physical. But the origin of that is actually conceptual. So the table is an embodiment of the idea. Without idea, you cannot have a table. Okay? Is that clear? Without the idea of table, there is no physical manifestation of table. So a table is really, what is it really? In the basic sense, it's actually the concept, the idea. So going back to the book example, the book is really a collection of ideas. But it's not only for books. Even a table is basically the idea of the table. And what happens is, and the rest of you are also correct, because you have an impression of a table from past experience. So your mind has an idea of table. And when you look at the object table, the mind grasps the idea from the object. And it matches the idea which I had before to the object that I have extracted from the object. And you see a match. And then you say, oh, this is a table. So the mind does amazing things unknowingly. This is what the mind is doing. The mind is constantly extracting meaning and ideas from the world. Okay, and then it's corroborating that with previous experience, the ideas that already exist, and then it evolves. The mind evolves. It makes new concepts, it makes new meanings and so on.
Where does the sense of vision come into this?
The sense of vision... Sense of vision has collected information about the table.
That's the mind's instrument.
Yeah. So it has collected information of the object table, and it has conveyed to the mind. But what it has really conveyed is the idea of the table. So do you all now agree the actual reality behind all objects is the idea, the concept. So that's why we talk about the world as a conceptual space, not a physical world. Because if we talk about physical, then we are bound to it, right? We are just tightly bound by that realm. But if we come from the other way around, then we know that this physical is actually a manifestation of the idea at a level which the senses can perceive. That's the correct definition of physical world. So when I said the reality is conceptual, not physical, that's what I mean. It's not because we're not denying the fact that we experience a physical realm. We're not denying that experience. We're not saying it's unreal, but we're understanding it properly. The understanding is that the concept, when it is brought to a level of the senses, because the senses are in hierarchy, they are lower than the mind. When the senses can perceive an idea, that becomes physical. That seems to, that is what we call known as, that is what we mean by physical. But the problem arises that if we treat the physical by itself and disconnect it from any idea, and then you go a completely different route. Then you'll break down the table, you'll say this made of these atoms, there's this color, that height, and then its constitution is this. You're completely thrown off the track. Is that okay? So the idea table, and that I connect to Bhagavad Gita verse, is the numinous reality behind our observation. That is the source of the object table, and that's the phenomenal. So we're experiencing a phenomenal reality, but the numinous reality behind that is the table. Make sense? So just with this, you can throw the entire scientific paradigm upside down. Just with this. Just with some few key verses in Bhagavad Gita. Why? Because we have objects, but we know objects do not exist by themselves. The object behind object is the concept, and that's the phenomenal and numinous connection. But now if we go a step further, what was numinous before can now become phenomenal, and there's a numinous associated with it, and that's the soul. The soul is encircled by various concepts in the form of the subtle body. And now if we treat the soul as a phenomenal, at a phenomenal realm, then the soul of all souls becomes the numinous reality behind everything. So then if we go a little bit up the hierarchy, so we just talked about here, right? We just talked about this connection. But if we go a little bit above in the hierarchy, then the soul of all souls becomes a scientific principle. God is a scientific principle. Just see the difference in perspective if we come down with scriptural knowledge.
Where would the mind fit in? Sorry.
The mind is in the concepts.
So it's on the same layer as the concepts? Okay.
Yeah, concepts basically... Somebody on the phone? Hare Krishna? Question, Prabhu? Yes, go ahead.
So Prabhu, when you introduce meaning, like for example, you had those 4 objects there, the cricket bat, ball and the golden ornaments. So it's only to a mind who is trained in that particular way, it appears like there is relation between all of these. If a dog is looking at it, probably like none of them makes any sense for the dog. And it's just that it seems that the living entities are wired in such a way by like virtue or curse of their level of consciousness. And so it appears that whatever is the level of the consciousness, the reality is perceived accordingly. Because it's only because like we have been trained in such a way that a cricket bat associates with a cricket ball, because we know the rules of the game, and both of them are made of gold, and both of them have the shape of ornaments, and therefore they relate. So those relations are just seem to be artificial.
Fine, okay, but what's your point?
The point is, when we introduce meaning, we are introducing subjectivity as well. Because everybody, for them, the same objects can mean many things.
That is fine, yeah, meaning is subjective, but that is fine. But the point here is to acknowledge the fact that there is meaning. And meaning needs a place in discussion about science and reality. That's my main point. Meaning needs a place in discussion of reality.
So what if somebody says that meaning is an artificial...
So they may not have any meaning associated with a ball and a bat. That's okay, right? Because their mind has no previous experience of that. So it is true that the mind gets trained and it can perceive higher object, higher things and different things. So mind does undergo transformation. Mind is not a static energy. But the point here is that everybody has a mind, and mind deals with meanings. The meanings could be different from person to person, but you cannot deny the fact that any person will have nothing to do with meaning. Even an infant, newly born baby, knows the difference between what is food and what is not food for it to consume. The infant baby has a small mind, right? It has only very limited scope of mind, but that mind has enough meaning to tell already in the world what is mother's milk, what is not mother's milk. So all living entities have connection with meaning. The levels of meanings could be different, and it can also evolve over time, but you cannot deny meaning, the important role of meaning. Is that okay?
So you are saying there can be like true meaning and false meanings.
Exactly, yes. Good question, always forward. So world is not made of ordinary matter as we ordinarily think. The world is actually a collection of ideas. Okay? So ideas can be of two types. True, Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu, good. They can be false. Okay? What does true meaning mean? True means the meaning will withstand the test of time. That means no matter what happens, the meaning will remain intact for that particular idea. And for false, depending on the circumstance, it's true sometimes, maybe not, it's false sometimes. So that is material, that is spiritual. And philosophy is required to distinguish the two. That is why we need philosophy. Unless we have the philosophical bent of mind, you'll just mix up left and right. You'll mix one with the other, and then you'll go in a completely unfavorable direction. So to distinguish spirit from matter, to distinguish false ideas from true ideas, we need philosophy. And the scripture has enabled us, has empowered us with this philosophy that we need to distinguish from spirit and matter. So if you go to 10th canto, hardly any philosophy. I think until the appearance of Lord Krishna, there is still philosophy. Demigods are praying in the womb, when Lord Krishna is in the womb of Mother Devaki. So they are also talking high philosophy. And once Krishna appears, philosophy gone, only ecstasy. Right? But until you get to the 10th canto, look any chapter in the Bhagavatam, any canto up to the 9th canto, you'll never find a set of verses or a topic without philosophy. Even the prayers that the devotees offer, Prahlad Maharaj prayers, Dhruv Maharaj prayers, full of intricate, topmost philosophy. Why? Again and again and again. Right? Bhagavad Gita we know is philosophical. Right? There's no stories. Sometimes we say that Bhagavatam is no philosophy, only stories. But actually it's philosophy in a way that you can drink it. But Bhagavad Gita philosophy, maybe you need to chew it, you need to think about it. But Bhagavatam philosophy is presented in such a way that you can drink it. It just goes in. But philosophy is there. And why we need so much of repetition of philosophy? Why? Because we are mixing up ideas all the time. To give us a clear understanding of what is false, what is true, we need philosophy to distinguish. And once we are well trained in this, once we know what is what, then we can hold on to the true and get rid of the false. And by the end of 9th canto, Srila Prabhupada says, completely self-realized. That means what? You can never again mistake true for false, false for true. You can tightly hold on to the true philosophy, and then you are eligible to enter into Krishna's pastimes.
Can we understand under the light of absolute versus relative? True is absolute and false is relative?
Yes, if we define these words absolute and relative means, again, sometimes true, sometimes not true, but absolute true always, irrespective of circumstances, time, circumstances, then yes, the same thing. Okay.
The only caveat there is that absolute is usually referred to Krishna, who is unchanging, but for the soul it can be.
Yes, that's why. Yeah, good point. Do you want to elaborate on that? Yeah, so the absolute truth, sometimes we refer to the complete absolute truth, that is Sri Krishna, that everything that exists, right? Everything that exists, that's referred to as absolute truth. But you can still, in this relevance, you can still use the word absolute, but we should be sure what the meaning is. We're not talking about Krishna, the absolute truth. But here, when we say true, means it will absolutely be true, no matter what, right? But different living entities are experiencing different realms of this truth. So therefore, what we call absolute is not really the absolute truth, Krishna, right? It is absolutely true for us in all circumstances. So just make that be sure to understand that distinction.
I just wanted to share something which I was reading. If your previous slides, they're so fantastically describing and slowly unveiling layer by layer. Very good for the scientific community. I was just trying to, see it maps so perfectly to what I have been teaching, the kids on the holy name. If you go to your couple of slides before where,
more? Yes.
So here when you talked about how table equals to table, right? It's the mind. So Sachinandan Maharaj actually talks that when we are chanting the holy name, and he talks about, when he does his Kartik Vrata, he was sharing that when you chant the first 16 round, your mind is okay. My 16 rounds quota is over. I'm done for the day. But now, my intelligence, I tell, no, it's my vrata, I better continue. And then he goes on to describe that after the third set of 16 rounds, the mind starts to become like a good librarian. It starts to bring those images of Radha and Krishna, because you're constantly chanting the name, from your reservoir of all the memories which you have done in devotion service. And that starts to come to your mind. So your mind is now being churned with the energy of the pure holy name.
That's right.
And it's revealing the real concept, the concepts which are real, as opposed to that which is, relative reality.
Exactly.
And then your next slide actually also perfectly fits in. He says that, I'm sorry, I don't have the quote exactly from where, but he says that in this whole cosmic manifestation, we know that the holy name is spiritual, and us as spirit souls is spiritual. We are the only two that have the same composition. Everything else is actually, it can be transformed. It's matter, it is temporary. But, for example, we may challenge that, well, what about the Bhagavatam, that we call it spiritual, the deities, we call them spiritual. But if you notice, we transform their material property into spiritual by using them for the purpose of glorifying Krishna, who is absolute. As a result of that, even the deities, they take the form, the matter takes the form as described in the scripture, which is again, absolute truth. And as a result, they are spiritual. But really speaking, in terms of composition itself, the holy name and the spirit soul, that is us, they are the only two things that are originally spiritual. So that is why when we chant the holy name, it, like how Prabhupada says, it's coming, the vibration is coming from the spiritual stratum. And the way choice of words is so interesting, it sounds so scientific.
Yeah.
It comes from the spiritual stratum and reminds me.
It touches the soul.
Yeah, that I am not this
part of
physical, my perception of physical reality, but what is my original position. So just got reminded of how it maps to that.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madhavi. Can we hold, Prabhu? Question or urgent question?
No question, just a comment.
Comment. Okay.
I liked your next slide because that's where I am, scratching my head.
Yeah.
And next time I look at an apple, I'm going to think about whether you are a real apple or a spiritual apple. But, jokes apart, it's really nice to get this. It's a wonderful realization sitting in the class today to understand this concept of a world of ideas, because it explains to me a simple concept that Maharaj keeps explaining, that Jiver Daya, you are a friend to the world when you give them what they really need. And that's something I'm always struggling with philanthropy and that. And then when you come to the concept of idea, who is a friend? And you understand the true image of a friend versus the false image. A lot of concepts that Maharajas teach us on a daily basis become easier to understand when we understand a world of ideas.
Yes.
So thank you so much.
Yes. Yeah, actually there is I'm spelling these things out, but devotees realize these things, but they may not realize that they actually know these things. So unless somebody spells it out, then it becomes clear and is solid. Many lectures, you'll notice Vaisheshika Prabhu putting in something very, very subtle and scientific, something like this, in the middle of his lecture. Okay, I've seen it many times. So this is actually, the devotees are perceiving this. Why? Because we are in touch with the holy name, we are touching with the scriptures, with Srimad Bhagavatam. So everybody is getting enlightened, basically. So, but the attempt here is to just make it more systematic and present it. Yes, Prabhu?
Prabhuji, I want to make 2 points. Like that Mataji said about apple, is it real or fake? So as per my Guru Maharaj's teaching, every apple is spiritual. If we are taking that apple to enjoy ourselves, it becomes material. We change it to material, it is not material, it is spiritual. But if we take the apple and offer to Krishna, it becomes spiritual. It takes its own original form. We change the form, it becomes material. And so far, everything what you're saying, true, false, mind, how mind takes, all the senses are grouped about the mind. It is just because we people who are sitting in this class or anywhere, educated class, we have been overburdened with so much of information from our childhood that we are not given the right information. That's why we are taking this mind class. If a kid is born in a village in India and he has been only taught Gita and Bhagavatam, he don't have to sit here. He is already spiritual. Because we are taking all whatever we are saying, in a material way. And we are denying what is spiritual. And to the person who is sitting on Vyasasana, he is trying to convey us that no, look at this way. Because our mind has been overwritten by so many things. The person who is sitting at Vyasasana is first erasing it and putting us the new knowledge, the original knowledge. That's the only problem. Otherwise, if the kid is born and he is not given all the scientific, mathematics, sociology, all this information, just fed with Gita and Bhagavatam, he don't have to worry about the mind because his mind is already spiritual.
I agree with that, but it's not. It is true. What you're saying is true, but it's not that we have to do it only now because we are overburdened with different education system. It's not only a necessity right now. Right now, it is manifest in the form of this modern education, which we need to clearly separate from the Vedic version. But at different times, there are different challenges. That's the nature of this world. So time and again, something else, if we get rid of this modern education system or whatever, if you're not burdened by that, you'll be burdened by something else. So it's not that we need philosophy now in this day and age because we are mixed up. But that's, if you see the Bhagavatam, the history of the world tells us that this philosophy to distinguish what is true from not true is required all the time, because the material world is a place where false ideas get propagated by the influence of time. That's what this world is about. So if we want to separate the false from reality, then we have to go through this training. So yes, true, kids in the village may not have influence of like mathematics and science and all that, but they'll have a different set of challenges. And in order to deal with those challenges, also you need the same thing. You need the same message from the Bhagavatam. So it doesn't matter. As long as it's in the material world, we need this. We need this. Okay, so now we come to the concept of Shabda Brahman. So now this is the final thing, I think, in this link, in this connection. And then I forget what's coming next, but we'll see. So now since with this background, let's try to understand the phenomenal world. What is the world that we are seeing? The scripture tells us that it is Shabda Brahman. Shabda Brahman. Brahman means supreme, higher realm of energy. But it is in what form? Shabda, it's sound, sound form. So how do we understand that? Oh, actually, before this, let me ask you a question. So can you think of any object which has no name? So nice. It exists because it has a name, right? So the name and the existence cannot be separated, right? Because you cannot think of any object without no name. As soon as you think of object, it has a name, right? What is name? Name is actually a sound representation of the object. Name is the sound representation of the object. So the mind has ideas, and the phenomenal object is represented first as sound. Because when you have an idea, if you want to convert an idea of a table into a table, what is the first step of conversion? You give it a name, and then you have to say that it should look like this. You have to explain your concept, right? The explaining concept needs words. You need to translate your idea into words, and words is sound. Okay, so the first step of translating ideas into a thing which the senses can perceive is sound. Okay, so the first presentation of the conceptual realm in the phenomenal space is sound. And I'll get into this later on in the seminar, and there is an energy called prana which makes this conversion. It enables this conversion. That's one of the functions of prana. That's not the only function, but that's one of the functions. So now we are able to understand the gross. Gross means that which the senses can perceive. It comes from the subtle. It's not the other way around. Right? The description of an object, it comes from the idea, but the sound, that means, comes from the idea. So the gross comes from the subtle. It's not the other way around. And sound is the subtlemost gross object. Gross means because it is perceivable to the ears, right? Sound is so it comes to the level of the. That is what gross actually means. It comes to the level of the gross. It's less subtle than the mind, but it is the subtlemost of all the gross objects. And all phenomenal objects must have a sound associated with it, and that is its name. That is its name, and that's the description of it. So no phenomenal reality can manifest without sound. The world exists because of sound. And that's why the world is called as Shabda Brahman. Shabda Brahman. Yes.
I was about to ask a question, Prabhuji, but then I answered, but I thought I'll mention that as a comment. When you were mentioning, I have a concept of table, and in order to convey that I want to build a table, we need to specify. And then I was thinking, why can't we just write? I can say, hey, without speaking. But then I was thinking, the writing came into existence. If we think about how I'm able to write into English, someone spoke, they agreed upon, when I write this is what it means. So I was thinking, even the written language is actually comes from sound.
Exactly.
So, yeah, basically,
it's a different manifestation of sound.
Yeah.
It's in the written form. It's not verbal. It's not speech, but it is also sound. It's recorded sound. Written. Yes, exactly. He receives instructions through sound. Yes. So the world is manifest because of sound. So if we find ourselves trapped in a realm full of sound, how can we get out? Through sound also. There is no other way. It's not by vision, not by touch, not by tasting. Of course, the other senses can be employed also in the service, but first with sound. That's why we talk about hearing. So through a different kind of sound, we can actually come out of this world, and that's the transcendental sound, the holy name. Yes.
Prabhu, when you say gross comes from the subtle, it appears like gross is more or less imagined reality. So is it like there is the physical world, and because of the subtle senses we are perceiving it in a certain way, or the physical world itself is it's a construction? Because you say gross comes from the subtle.
So let's understand what gross means here. So gross means that which can be perceived by the senses. Okay? If there is something that cannot be perceived by senses only with the mind, then that's not gross, that's subtle. Like for example, you see something and you become happy. So the sense of happiness, the feeling of happiness is subtle, because happiness cannot be perceived with any of the senses. It can be perceived by the mind. But the senses have played a role in making your mind feel happy. Right? So there is interaction with the world at the gross level with the senses, but then there is also subtle realm of the mind where your feeling of happiness is. So I'm saying that the gross manifestation, it comes from the subtle. There's a two-way interaction between the subtle and the gross. The gross can also feed into the subtle and transform it, but in the first place, the gross is manifest from the subtle. And that I'm actually giving an example to understand that. I mean, the gross of this world is not manifest from us. It's from a higher being, but it's the same process. Just like I think of a table and then I make a table, the conversion is through sound. Similarly, the entire world is made from sound. The phenomenal world is constructed from sound.
But we start with thought.
Thought is the idea, yes.
So then we start with thought.
Yeah.
Sound is a structuring of thought that creates a manifestation. So sound is the vessel through which thought acts.
You can say...
thought would be a manifestation of sound. Sound is the original.
Prabhu, I'm shouting, ah, what is the thought? If I have a thought only, I'll shout, ah, right?
The ah that you're shouting is a different sound. It is a sound that is coming out of the physical gross. The sound that... Sorry, I should be asking.
So what is your question, Mataji?
Because you said that the higher being created this, it's come from subtle to gross. Immediately the question is, but he must have thought it to create it.
Of course,
like you said,
yes.
The idea comes before the sound.
That is correct, yeah. Is that your question or you're telling?
That's my question. So the idea comes before the sound.
Yes, correct.
So the idea is not a manifest thing, but from sound we manifest.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. So the phenomenal world, the manifest world, is basically sound representation of the idea. And this is an idea in the mind of God. So the world in the unmanifested is an idea in God's mind. But it's a real idea. And it becomes manifest for some time, then he withdraws it. It becomes unmanifest. Okay, but that manifestation takes place through sound. And when it is manifest and we find ourselves in it, entrapped by all kinds of sound, the way out is also by sound. Okay, not by any other means. Can we go forward?
Can you talk a little bit more about the prana, which is...
Not... we'll wait. Let's wait. But at least you got the idea, right? The conversion that's taking place between the conceptual realm and sound, the connection is made by prana. So prana is manifest in our bodies, and that's why we are able to speak our ideas. If we cannot convert ideas into sound, then there's something wrong in the constitution, the functioning of the body. But the same prana is also active in breathing. That's why there is this pranayam exercise. But prana is a multifaceted thing. There are many aspects, angles to prana. This is one of them.
So is that also a sound?
Which one?
Prana?
Prana is not sound. It's a form of energy.
It's a wave though, right? Some kind of... How do we define...
Yeah, it's different than sound. Yeah, it's a form of energy. It's a material energy. It's not spiritual. Later on I'll explain more. Yes, Prabhu. So now we are actually going to connect all this to cosmology. What you might be thinking, oh, hey, come on, what's going on? why are you talking about all this? You called us to hear, tell us about cosmology.
So Prabhu, as you distinguish between like true and false ideas, sound is also true and false, right? Similarly.
Sound is true and false. So see, sound is a carrier of meaning, right? Yeah, meaning means idea.
If it is carrying a material meaning.
If it is carrying material meaning, that's material sound. Yeah. If the sound is carrying a spiritual true meaning, that's spiritual sound. Exactly, yeah. So the sound is associated with the meaning. And when you hear something, even if you don't understand it in the beginning, the mind eventually, if you keep repeating the holy name, it will extract the meaning out of that sound. And that meaning is, what is the meaning of the holy name?
Oh, Radha and Krishna, please.
Krishna is non-different than his holy name. That meaning you will be able to perceive if you repeat the sound again and again and again. The mind gets purified and you'll be actually able to experience Krishna non-different than his holy name. Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, just one comment. Actually, Prabhupada writes in first canto, 16th chapter of Bhagavatam, in his purport that it's similar to what you were just saying. This material world is a product of the Mahatattva, which is a state of the Lord's dreaming condition. In his Yoga Nidra, mystic slumber in the causal ocean. And yet the whole creation appears to be a factual presentation of his creation. This means that the Lord's dreaming conditions are also factual manifestations.
Very nice, very nice. Thank you. One more comment? No. I have to finish few more slides. But the next part is easy. We'll go through it quickly. So now we make the connection to cosmology. You want to say something, Mataji?
I guess I just wanted to say that. Never mind, we'll come back to it. Okay. I just want to block you.
So why are we talking about all this? So what is this to do with Vedic cosmology of 5th canto? The Vedic cosmology of the Srimad Bhagavatam is a conceptual map of the universe. So we talked about conceptual realm, right? So in this conceptual realm, it's a map of the entire universe. So just like, actually I have an example coming up. We can make a conceptual map of something, right? Suppose, take table example. So we can make some kind of a map. Table has 4 legs, right? It has a desk kind of thing. Then the 4 legs support the desk. It can be this tall, it can be that color, it can be composed of that. So we can describe all these things, right? What constitutes a table. So we make a map in the conceptual realm, idea realm, right? Even before a table is manifest. So similarly, the Srimad Bhagavatam cosmology is a conceptual map of the entire universe. It's a description about the different places. But this description is in the conceptual realm. It's not in the physical realm. It's not referring to the physical realm. But we shouldn't think that just because this is at an idea stage, as a conceptual stage, the places that we were talking about may be there, may not be there, who knows, imaginary could be. No, there is a phenomenal reality as corresponding to every part of this map. That means if in a conceptual realm, if I talk about 10 different cities, then these cities do exist somewhere. I may not be able to go there, that's a different thing, but they do exist. So similarly, the Vedic cosmology, it will describe different realms, and all these realms do exist. They do exist in reality. I cannot go to the most of it, but they do exist. Okay, but we are very limited to a very, very small portion of this reality. So we are in a very, very small portion. But even that small portion is extremely significant. So we'll read that mentioned in the cosmos. So actually, I'm going to skip this slide because, or actually, I'll just say one thing. I'm going to, the pictorial thing is, I think I've explained that already. So just one comment, the one I said at the bottom. So all this understanding we are able to derive from basically few verses of Bhagavad Gita, right? The first verse I quoted was phenomenal luminous, and then the mind group, senses grouped about the mind. So is it that the ordinary philosophers don't catch this? Is it that they don't understand this, or they're not able to grasp it? They can. They do understand the distinction between luminous and phenomenal. but they don't take it all the way through because they run into a difficulty, and that difficulty is that this kind of understanding, it implies existence of God. It directly implies existence of God. So if you want to avoid God, which is, by the way, all the living entities are trying to do in this world, so no wonder they will avoid the path that leads to God, right? So they will stay clear of that and then do some tricks to still have that phenomenal numinous distinction, but they basically lock us down to physical realm of reality. So even in science there's a phenomenal and numinous distinction, but the reality is bound at physical level. The numinous takes the form of theories, mathematical theories, and so on. So that's the only thing over here. So now this conceptual map should have a structure, right? If you draw a map of a place, then we should have some structure, right? You cannot just put any city anywhere, right? You need to have a structure which has something to do with reality. So the universe is a conceptual map, but it is organized as a inverted tree. So that's what the inverted tree that we referred to in the beginning, and even in Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, right? Urdhvam Ulam Adashakam Ashwatam Prahuravayam. So it's an inverted tree with roots upward, branches down. So what does this inverted tree mean? So we have all seen an org chart, right? In our organizations. So what does an org chart look like? It's like a tree, but the root, the CEO is at the top level, right? Everybody is ultimately reportable to the CEO, but then you have many others at the bottom, right? I mean, who are down the chain. So if these people see, let's say they have offices next to each other, but one is a CEO, the other is, down like just a manager or something. So then their separation between the physical office does not define their function in the organization. It's actually their position in the organization, which is conceptual, right? What really distinguishes a CEO from another employee in the company is what he's able to conceive for the future vision of the company, right? The ordinary employee does his own small little thing. The CEO is setting the vision for next 5 years, how to grow the business 10 times, right? So conceptually they are far apart, but physically they might be next to each other in the next door offices. So the physical distance doesn't matter. The conceptual realm is what matters. And then I have another example. I somehow found this picture. Can you see it? Is former President Obama. He's giving a, what do you call this? Fist bump to who seems to be a janitor in the White House, right? They are far apart. But we shouldn't, just by looking at this picture, we shouldn't confuse president and the janitor, right? We shouldn't confuse the two. So I'm just showing this to show, to tell you that there is a conceptual realm and it has organization, and just like an org chart has an inverted tree structure, similarly the universe is also organized in a similar manner as an inverted tree. But what is this third dimension that we're talking about? The tree has a structure, it has a dimension, right? Above this dimension here. So I have an arrow here, right? The president, and then we have many employees down over here. So what distinguishes the president or the one higher up than the one at below is the level of abstraction that they can conceive. So this dimension that is used in org structure, it is the level of abstraction. So the higher up you are able to conceive of more abstract things, like unseeable things of the future. The CEO can see 5 years from now. Go down this road, business will flourish. Go here, business will fail. He can see it, right? But you and I cannot see it. So he has capacity to see more abstract reality. And that's why he's the leader, he guides. So this dimension is the level of abstraction. And if you go in the horizontal dimension, I didn't have any arrows, I didn't draw any arrows here. But if you're in the same level, then basically we can perceive same level of abstraction. So is it clear? this dimension. So universe in the Vedic cosmology, so I just take these simple examples to motivate this idea that the universe is also an inverted tree. But this dimension that we're talking about is the level of abstraction that the living entities in different realms can perceive of, or they can experience. Okay, so that's what I have mentioned here. Vedic cosmology is description of different locations in conceptual realm, which is organized as an inverted tree. And what is this location? What does this location mean? Each location is a place where living entities can have some kind of experience. So where we get placed depends upon what we are destined to experience, and that's the kind of experience that we'll go through. But because we find ourselves in a certain location at some point doesn't mean that we'll stay there forever. So as we interact with the world, we become eligible to go higher up, or we can glide down. So we keep hopping on this tree. So this universe is an inverted tree in the conceptual realm. We are in a certain location, but we are constantly moving by interacting with the world, by changing our environment, by changing our subtle body, and so on. Is that okay?
Prabhuji, this tree starts like a tree. From a dot, it spreads. But the inverted tree confuses me because it spreads on both sides.
Both sides?
It's like a V. It's like a sand, the timepiece. It spreads its roots and it spreads its leaves. That always confuses me because we always understand it as Supreme Brahman.
Spreads its roots.
So its roots, it's inverted, right? An inverted banyan tree. Its roots are also spread, the tree is also spread. The only point of junction is the trunk. It narrows towards the trunk and expands again. But we always understand it as the Supreme Lord is one, right?
Yeah, actually I'm not so sure about this spreading of roots. Maybe Srivastava Prabhu also can comment on it. But when we talk about the root is the root, basically the origin.
So it's not really a timepiece.
Yeah, I don't...
A sand.
So when we talk of that, the usual understanding is that the material world is a reflection of spiritual world, and because of which it appears upside down. So there are trees on both the sides, but one is real, the other is not.
Okay.
So in Srila Prabhupada writes, if you can fold a paper with a circle and exactly in the half, and then when you open up, you will see that half of the circle is in one space of the paper versus the other half. So without the real, there can be no material or absolute. So it ties into what you're saying. So the understanding of branches up and down, the same quality of branches, I don't think that...
We can look up the 15th chapter. I think it mentions that it also has roots going upward, but those roots are not the root of the tree. Yeah, so they come down further down, like you have leaves, branches and so on, but then there also they have some roots going upward. I think that has a different meaning than the original root that we're talking about. Yes, Mataji. Yes, Prabhu, after Mataji.
So thank you so much for this explanation of the concept of the inverted tree. It's now what Manjulakanta is talking about, the inverted, that this world is inverted tree makes sense now, particularly where you talked about the higher level of abstractions that you talked about. So my question is that, can you give an example of, like, if we look at this universe, can we say the universe is an inverted tree, or no? The entire material world is an inverted.
It is inverted tree.
The universe also?
Yes, so the universe is structured as an inverted tree.
So we will say Brahma is like the CEO and the demigods.
And actually I have this question for you. Who occupies this position in our universe?
So Brahma.
It's Lord Brahma, yes.
So when you say they are able to see certain things, so the three Kaldarshis also fall into that category? They
are higher up than us, right. Yeah. Brahma is able to see Lord Brahma is able to see, he can plan the entire universe. What kind of vision must he be having? Right? I mean, he gets that potency from the Lord, but he is able to perceive how I'm supposed to construct or how I'm supposed to manifest this entire universe.
Exactly. And even the physical seeing also, like people on the higher planets are somehow able to see what's happening in the planets below, but we can't see what demigods are doing like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, demigods are observing all our activities, but not the other way around. We cannot observe. Can somebody give him a microphone?
Thank you. Jai Shri Narayan. But this chart is not related with the Urdhva Moola Madhasyakam, as far as I know. The Urdhva Moola Madhasyakam Aswatham Prahura Vyayam. That sloka actually is stating about cut the roots which are coming down. Okay.
It will talk about cutting the roots in the next verse.
Yeah,
but first it describes what is there to be cut. And
that sloka actually is telling about, as far as I know, it is telling about you separate material world from the spiritual world. Okay. You don't think you and your body is same. Okay. That sloka is telling about that meaning, not like this chart.
No. Okay. So
if it is saying this chart, Krishna doesn't say cut down the lower level. Right?
No. Okay, that's not what is meant here. So first of all, in the Bhagavad Gita, it's mentioned that nobody can visualize this tree. Okay, so I have dared to put some kind of picture here because we are all visual people, right? We want to visualize things. So the idea is only to help us visualize, but this chart is not what the tree actually is. So no, but the general idea applies. That means Lord Brahma is at the top. He's compared to the root, and then the manifestation down under is like the branches and different. So that analogy still holds, but don't think this is how it looks like. So nobody can visualize that tree. No, yeah, I tried it. I couldn't. Yeah, you cannot. We are just so very tiny, limited in our abilities to perceive things. We just cannot perceive it. But we should be able to grasp the general idea. Okay, and then it does talk about cutting down the tree. Later on, I can explain what does that cutting. It doesn't mean cut down the lower planes. I mean, even if we try to, we cannot do that. But it actually means cut down our attachment to the tree, because we are hopping from one place to another, trying to enjoy in different ways. So you cut your attachment to this hopping business. That's what is. Okay, so universe as an inverted tree makes. Is it okay? So Garbhodakshaya Vishnu is the origin of space in which this tree manifests. So it's a conceptual space, but Garbhodakshaya Vishnu is the origin of that space. Even the space doesn't exist for things to manifest before the creation takes place. There is no space for the manifestation to take place. So Garbhodakshaya Vishnu has to make that space available, and that space is the lotus stem that comes out of his navel as he lies down on the Garbhodaka cushion.
So space is also a concept, right? Or
space is
it a substance or a
So, but now the follow-up question can be, if Garbhodakshaya Vishnu is the origin of space within the universe, where does he lie in the universe? So that is the question I think she asks. Does he not create the universal ball first and then lies down?
Yeah, okay, so this can be made more accurate, yes. So, actually it's the origin of space for the planetary systems to manifest. Not material space. It's the space in which this conceptual tree can grow, can manifest. So universe is an inverted tree, right? But the tree is not in physical space. It's in conceptual space, right? But for the tree to manifest, you need to have space first. And Garbhodakshaya Vishnu is the origin of that space. But I should maybe make it more accurate. Within the universe, maybe not so accurate, because the Brahmanda is already there. He lies on the Garbhodak ocean, and the space in which the planetary systems can manifest is created by him. Is
before the creation, because everything is light, he has to create a space, make it dark, and then the universe.
right. Okay? The stem is completely dark in the beginning. Dark meaning what? We're talking about conceptual space. Now don't confuse with physical space. So physical space is helpful to visualize what's going on in conceptual space, but it's actually not the physical space. So that's the important distinction. So there's a reason why we have a physical reality that we experience, right? And the scripture is full of these analogies. Just like, let's think of an example. So the scripture always gives us analogies, right? Just like two birds sitting on the tree, right? One is witnessing, one is eating the fruit. So we see a tree in the physical world, right? What we think is physical, we see two birds, we can visualize, one is eating, one is witnessing. Oh, so this is what is going on in the conceptual realm, the same thing. But in order to make that connection, we need some visualization which is given to us by the manifestation in physical space. But that description holds exactly in the same way, but in the conceptual space. So we cannot transition to conceptual space unless we have this physical realm which we can visualize, right? So when the stem is dark, imagine a dark tube, no light. Something similar going on in the stem of coming from Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. Causal ocean will come to. So the 14 planetary systems are situated in the lotus stem of Lord of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, but this dimension we should think is what? Is the level of abstraction. It's not a physical three-dimensional thing. Oh, going up means Satyalok, going down means Patal-lok, right? It's not like that. It's going up and down is valid, but it's a level of abstraction that you're traveling up and down. Yes, conceptual realm. And then that's the figure I have. So according to the experience that one is allowed to, experience, then the vertical, the different planetary systems are created for different types of living entities, and they are situated according to their karma and inclinations, and guna and karma. I've already mentioned these 14 planetary systems are situated in the lotus stem of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. And now the final concept that we need to understand is what is the yojana. Okay, that's the last step, and then we'll be ready to go into the actual cosmology section. So we'll start today. We'll at least begin, and then we have to think how to. Most likely we have to schedule some more time. So what is the yojana? So if you read through the pages in the 5th canto, you'll see that 1 yojana equal to 8 miles. And there's not much more information than that. But then things get really confusing, because we talked about Mount Sumeru, 84,000 yojanas tall, multiply by 8, so many miles. I don't know what it means. But there's more to it. And that we have to understand in the context of this conceptual space that we have developed so far. So if you have two locations in this conceptual realm structured as an inverted tree kind of thing, you have A and B. If you are at A and you want to go to B, you're not allowed to go just directly linearly from A to B. There is no path connecting A to B, just like that, like the straight arrow shown here. So the way to go from A to B is, you have to go up the hierarchy, you have to come down the hierarchy. So that's the path, right? Because it's a tree. Like imagine a tree and you have branches. You have to go to the trunk and then connect to the another branch, right? You cannot just fly from one branch to another, right? So in the conceptual realm, you cannot just go like that. So then you need a unit for measurement in this conceptual realm, and yojana is basically this unit of measurement for travel in the conceptual space, conceptual realm. Which concepts? Yes, that's what I said. So some things will appear new, but you have to just stitch it along as you go. And as I mentioned earlier, Rishiraj Prabhu's book did make many things clear. So yeah, he has many insights. I mean, imagine he's written a book on mystic universe. So he must, he must have done a lot of study, research, and put all this understanding together. So what does yojana mean? What does it mean in the, this distance in the concept? Can I finish this slide? And then I think the rest time will be for questions. So it represents the degree to which one must change, one must undergo conceptual change or change in the subtle body to travel from one location to the other. That means if you're situated on Earth, we are situated on Earth. If you want to go to the moon, you just don't sit in a rocket and just start going towards moon. Okay, that's not how you go to moon. You have to change your subtle body. You have to be make yourself suitable to enter the conceptual realm that exists on moon. So you have to undergo some change. Without change, you cannot just go by brute force. That's what it means. But things get confusing because although we talk about this distance in conceptual realm, the distance in the phenomenal space that we experience the phenomenal space, the distance in this space is also measured using yojanas. And if you don't distinguish the two, then it becomes really confusing. It is for this space that the conversion of 1 yojana to 8 miles that we usually measure, right? I'm going home, my home is 8 miles away, so you can use that conversion, 1 yojana to 8 miles. But if you think about it, these are after all just units, right? It's just a unit to measure distance. Technically, you can bring in miles even in the conceptual space and apply the same conversion. So that's what is going on, I think, in the verses of translations of Srimad Bhagavatam, that the conversion is used freely, but then the distinction may not be clear to us. So unless we make this distinction, it becomes very confusing. So to give you a concrete example of yojana, basically the summary point to take away is yojana has 2 aspects to it. One is these fonts are really small. Are you able to see? Yes. Okay. So the conceptual distance. What does conceptual distance means? It is the change in the subtle body that I need to undergo in order to reach a destination. So when we talk about sun being 100,000 yojanas above Bhumandala, that means there is a certain degree of change that I need to undergo in order to reach the sun planet. It does not mean that I have to travel 800,000 miles in physical space with a rocket to get to sun. That's not what it means. But then if you somehow manage to get to the sun, then you will see a sun god's chariot, which is described as 900,000 yojanas wide. That's 7.2 million miles wide. But if you manage to go to the sun, then you will actually, in a phenomenal space, you'll have a body suitable to see this chariot that wide. Okay? So one is about traveling distance in conceptual realm, change of subtle body, but the other is the manifestation of phenomenal reality at that new location, and you'll actually be able to see the sun god's chariot being so wide. So if we are eligible, we can go and have a look. Okay, so these are the 2 aspects of yojana that we need to keep in mind when we study the cosmology part.
When you are able to visualize that, then the ditches can become a little bit clearer.
Exactly. Thank you, Prabhu. That was a nice concluding statement. Yes, Vaikuntanath Prabhu. Oh, he said that in the beginning we started with this verse which is very difficult to understand. There are these ditches which made the oceans in Bhumandala, which are like 100,000 yojanas wide and so on. So we had some doubt, right? How could anything be that wide? And how could somebody's chariot have such wide wheels to make those ditches? So now with this understanding, Srivastava Prabhu is saying that now we can visualize how the ocean of sugarcane juice can be 200,000 yojanas wide or something like that. Okay, so if we can actually get to the ocean, if we make ourselves eligible to transfer ourselves to that ocean, then we'll actually be able to see that ocean that wide. So two aspects of yojana. So we have to be careful in distinguishing the two as we go along in the description of the cosmology section. So one final thing I will say, and we'll take questions. I think we only have 15 minutes left. So in future instances, I'll also point out instances where in the Srimad Bhagavatam, two different concepts are put next to each other, and the same terminology is used. So that tends to confuse us. So that's why it needs a little bit training to try to separate the two and then try to understand what is what and like that. So this is one critical concept. So I want to make sure everybody is okay with this, understood it to some extent, and then we are ready to go to the next. Okay.
So, Prabhuji, regarding the word yojana, what does it actually mean? Like, does it really mean mile? It means distance? What is the Sanskrit meaning for it?
Sanskrit meaning for it?
Yeah, yojana, etymology,
Actually, I didn't look that up. Good question. So I should look it up.
Yeah, that may give some clarity.
Maybe, okay, if it's easy to find, somebody can try. But yeah, good point. Thank you, Prabhu, for the feedback. I'll look into it before I come back next time. That was one thing. There was... Yeah, but I can say a little bit more. So in terms of absolute numbers, it's difficult to comprehend what it means. What does it mean to travel 100,000 yojanas to the sun? But it becomes a little bit easier to understand if we talk about relative distance. So the Bhagavatam describes sun is 100,000 yojanas above Bhumandala. The moon is 200,000 yojanas above Bhumandala. That means if you want to go to moon, it is twice as difficult than going to sun. The distance in the conceptual realm is twice as difficult to go to moon than to go to sun. In that sense, the sun is closer than the moon. And you'll see Prabhupada making such statements. The sun is closer to us than the moon. Because actually it's more difficult to go to the moon because the level of comforts, the living conditions on moon are very sophisticated. So it takes more to go to moon, to enjoy on the moon. It takes a lesser effort to go to sun. Not that going to sun is easy, but... Okay, so I think so my final slide is this. So end of the seminar, and I think now with all these concepts collected together, we actually get ready to go into the cosmology section. So I just listed the concepts that we covered, just as a review thing. Okay, we can take questions.
I guess one of the bewildering questions is that how did Hanuman as a baby go and eat the sun thinking it's a mango?
Yeah, good question. And same thing for Vamandev, right? Vamandev appeared as a dwarf Brahmana, and how come he manifested, he became so tall to pierce the covering of the universe? So, is it a question for later or you want me to answer now? Okay, let's hear the other questions and see if I can try to answer that one. Let's hear the other questions also. Yes, Prabhu.
Mine is not like a question, it's kind of a comment. So, when I was reading Ramayana, then when Sugriva sent his army to search for Mother Sita, so he was explaining actually about different part of the Bhumandala and where to search for what, and he was also mentioning about the amount of gold. So it seems like he had, better perception of this Vedic cosmology, and since they were celestial monkeys, so they had higher ability to see more of the universe. And same happens when the Pandavas, they went for conquering the world from the Rajasuya sacrifice. Then also they came in contact with other living entities whom we might wonder how they can exist and how they are around our...
so in the previous ages, the living beings were much more empowered than what we are right now. We are nothing actually. We are just limited to this tiny thing called Earth, and that's it, be happy here. But even in Dwapar Yuga, as you mentioned, the Pandavas, they were able to go to Indralok. They were able to travel to other places in Bhumandala. And the kings, when they ruled, their ruling was not only on tiny kingdom, but it extended all over the Bhumandala. Like Maharaj Priyavada's rule extends all over Bhumandala. Each one of his sons gets in charge of one of the islands, the Dvipas. So these living beings are basically supernatural for us from our standpoint. We cannot even comprehend what kind of consciousness they have. They have so much extent, they have so much purview over the different realms. It is possible, but in the Kali Yuga we don't see any examples, and we're very tinily restricted. But you'll find like yogis and things, right? They have some siddhis, they can travel from North India to South India in a second, or they have such kind of siddhis, right? So we see those kind of supernatural things, but again limited, restricted to the earthly realms. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
That was just a comment, right? Okay.
Yes. So you mentioned like yojana, the term yojana is used interchangeably, sometimes referring to physical distance, like when Putna dies, we know that she is 1 yojana long. I guess that's a physical distance, and sometimes it is mentioned as a level of purification which we need to attain. Yes.
To go to another destination.
So is that correct? So
that is
it's
right.
Up to us to interpret how it is.
Up to us, actually the interpretation is pretty clear. Once you know the distinction, it's hard to mix them. But without the separation, it becomes difficult to understand what's going on.
Hare Krishna.
That's what I found.
Prabhu, I'm still having a doubt with the conceptual yojana and the phenomenal yojana. So they are two different distances wise. It's a different distance, or in a conceptual you are saying that it's not really a distance, you have to go through certain changes to reach the destination.
It is also distance. It's not the distance like we think ordinarily. So I had this example. Actually, I skipped that page in the interest.
But you had an example of the plane on that's 900,000 yojana. Even that's more than the distance of the conceptual plane from that destination. So I'm not able to understand that.
So that's why we need to distinguish the two: the phenomenal distance versus the conceptual distance. So let me give you an example. So let's say two brothers or two friends, right? One is aspiring to go to America, like many of us. So what does it take to come to America from India, let's say? You just buy a plane ticket, sit on a plane and come here, right? Right? Yes or no?
Yes.
No. You need visa. You need qualification.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? Nobody can just come to America just like that. So one of the brothers or friends must have gone years of training in some field of knowledge, and he made himself eligible to apply. He got an invitation. Yes, you are now eligible to come. Please come. Right? So similarly, okay, so let me finish this. And then the other brother doesn't care, right? So he will never get an invitation, right? He has not gone through the training. Although, if both happen to sit on the same airplane, they will land in America. But their travel to America is not just a flight journey. One has gone through a process of evolution, but that evolution is in the conceptual realm. That means he has traveled some distance. So the travel to America is not just the flight time, it's not the flight journey. But whatever he has progress in the conceptual part, that is part of his journey to America. The other person did not go through that, so he cannot take the last leg either. He has not made himself to qualify. So that distance is hard for us to visualize. I think that's the difficulty. It's really, what does 100,000 yojana mean? What does it mean to go to the sun? Right? It is hard to visualize. But at least we can get a general sense. Right? It is the change in the subtle body that we need to undergo in order to be able to go there. Using the simple example I mentioned. It is true, yes, it is true. So, because quantities, exact quantities are mentioned, so they must have some meaning. So, that's a valid point. And yeah, I have not gone like further enough to answer that question. What does 100,000 actually mean? So, I don't have an answer to that. Yeah.
So Prabhu, when you say 8 miles, it means in the phenomenal, right?
In the phenomenal, yes.
Yeah.
1 yojana to 8 mile conversion.
So, but that 900,000 is not miles; it's just a number. But
900,000 yojanas, yeah.
It's just a number, but we don't know.
So in the phenomenal space, like we kind of know. Just like we see a car 12 feet wide, similarly, sun god's chariot 7.2 million miles wide. So something like that.
Yeah, but in conceptual space, we don't attach miles to it. It's unit, right? It's not yojana is just a number. Like for 900,000 is a number, but we cannot quantify it, right? That's what you're.
Yeah. I mean, we actually don't know what that number exactly means, but we just have a general idea. I think that's the.
But there are solutions, even though we cannot quantify the yojanas, but the process is already
defined. Is there, yeah. So the process to travel that distance is
there. Do this yajna, you can go to sun planet,
right.
Like that.
Right, exactly. So the process that you undergo by doing that yajna, it helps you to travel that distance.
And I was also thinking that we are talking about this in terms of point A to point B. And so, like if I'm the earthly planet, it'll take me, which means I am of a special consciousness. It'll take me some time, some level of degree of changes to be able to reach the sun planet as compared to a demigod. So the distance to the sun will be different for,
It will be, yes.
Changes.
And yeah, there are many layers of complexity involved here. The structure of the tree, as I said, it's hard to visualize, but it's not, all these distances are also not fixed. So suppose you go to a different Purana, Vishnu Purana, it will say that the distance to the sun is something else. So because we are used to thinking of physical distance, if I say distance to Los Angeles is so many miles, then it must be just that miles, right? So there's no different number to it. But the way the tree structure is organized, you can go to sun by many different routes through these different nodes, intersections. So it really depends what path you're taking to get to the sun. So the distance can vary. So these are not necessarily contradictions. That here one distance, here another distance. It depends on where you start and what path you take. So again, the absolute number 100,000, I don't have a good understanding of that right now. Yeah. Vijay Damodar, let's go take Vijay Damodar. He's waiting.
So Prabhuji, I think that, and this is a concoction, but I think it's a relatively decent one. So I do want you to scrutinize it.
What?
I'm proposing something.
Proposing?
Yeah. I think that there is a correlation between the two yojanas. It probably means that for a person at a particular consciousness level, if you were to traverse that distance, what is the equivalent effort he has to put in? For example, to reach sun, which is 153 million kilometers, if he has to put in an effort at an earthly consciousness level to have to travel 9 lakh miles, or whatever that term is. And depending on your consciousness, which is a measure of your speed, you can traverse that speed quickly. So a demigod will be able to traverse that distance much quicker. Lord Brahma or any Satyaloka or Brahmalok person can travel it even quicker. But that's, I think, because there's no other reason why the term should be used same within physical realm, the phenomenal realm, and the conceptual realm.
Yeah, I didn't understand completely what you're saying.
Okay, so the amount of effort that a person has to put, work done, right, to traverse from A to B in a physical realm, when you convert that work, the effort, for a given consciousness level to jump from one realm to another realm, it is a measure of
and convert that into distance?
Yes. So that is what it is. So for a person...
I'm not sure about that, because why should effort be coupled to the distance?
Because it depends on your consciousness.
No, if I'm more qualified or I'm more equipped, I can cover the same distance in less time.
Yes.
So it should manifest in somehow the time part.
So that is why each of these shastras give different distances for the same distance A and B. Because each of these shastras are meant for different consciousness person.
Okay. I have to think about that.
Sure, Prabhu. Thank you.
Yes.
So Prabhu, I had a question actually, so if you don't mind.
So Prabhu, about time. So it is 1 p.m. So what should we do? Start to wrap up? Few more minutes, okay. 1:08, okay. 1:08. I think this... Okay, let's hear the questions, okay, and then we'll see how much I can answer, try to answer now, and how much we have to come back later. So, Prabhu, yeah, say your question.
So, Prabhu, this is about the inverted tree. So, if I understand, it's a 14 planetary system, right? So, which means each one is one loka, each of those systems, right?
It's a loka or a collection of lokas?
Where is that mentioned? It's a collection of loka. Where is it mentioned that is actually a collection of loka?
No, okay, what do you mean by loka?
That's what I'm getting at. So loka means one,
like Maharloka, Tapaloka.
Yes, so Maharloka is not a collection of physical realms within that realm.
For example, let me tell you about Bhuloka, because that is more vividly described in the Bhagavatam. Like Bhumandala or Bhuloka is the same thing. So Bhuloka is not just one place, right? It is described as organization of different islands, 7 islands separated by oceans, and even within each island there is a structure. Like for example, we'll go into details of Jambudvip, the centermost island in Bhumandala. It has 9 different varshas. So there is structure, there is finer structure inside Bhuloka. So Bhuloka, as an entity is one thing, but there is finer structure inside. So although for higher realms, like Maharloka, Tapaloka, there is no description in the Bhagavatam. But you could imagine that there might be a finer structure there also. But we don't have everything in the Bhagavatam.
So it's not one physical, you're saying they could also be physically disparate.
So let's not use the word physical because of what we have gone through. Because physical word carries a meaning, right? And we've tried hard to separate that meaning from the meaning that Bhagavatam is carrying. So we can use the word phenomenal.
Okay, fine, phenomenal.
If you like
the reason
that,
why I asked this, Prabhuji, is that you mentioned in that hierarchy to go from point A and B were siblings. If they are siblings, that means they exist.
Yeah, again, don't take it literally. So these illustrations are meant to give us a general idea. But don't take it literally. Because then I know your question, that if you're on the same level, then why I need to go up and come down? Right? There must be a path from at the same level. So again, the tree structure I'm showing is very, very simplistic, just to give you the simple general idea, just to separate ordinary distance from distance in the conceptual realm. Like you need to travel through different nodes. So that's the only idea that I want to convey. So don't take it literally.
No, maybe there is actually, Prabhu. I think it is that there are these different places. Like for example, they say there are 400,000 consciousness level for just human species, right?
Yeah.
So maybe these other places within one phenomenal realm are actually being enjoyed by different consciousness.
It is possible, yes.
Yes, maybe that is the explanation.
That is correct, yeah. Okay, let's hear all the questions. Let's only hear the questions and we'll see if I can answer in the next 3 minutes. It's 1:05.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. So Prabhu, earlier in the lecture we had this point about mind can travel freely. Like where is the location of the mind? So mind can travel freely. So It's not necessarily tied to, it's not necessarily within the phenomenal. And at the same time, so since the mind can travel freely, somebody can mentally travel to sun, let's say, but they don't really see the sun god or the sun chariot, even if so the mind works by matching the label to the object, right? So that's how we get knowledge that the object is what it is. So so in that way, so if the mind travels to the like different part of the phenomenal world, for example, with our like we can see to some extent the sun, we can see in the sky, the moon, as we see with our naked eye, so to speak. So if the mind travels there, still it cannot, we have the label from the scripture, we know that sun god exists and the chariot, some descriptions are given, so some idea of the label is present, and we can see the object in the phenomenal world, but we cannot simply like tie them together, because probably we don't like see the chariot per se, though the conception exists. So in this regard, I want to ask you, in this framework that you have set up, how do you distinguish between imagination and conception?
Okay, I think it's a deep question, so we can discuss after like right after this, and then maybe we can summarize next time.
One last point just to add is, when Narada Muni travels, does he like cast his earthly body here and then goes? So the point here is, this conceptual travel in space actually entails change of the bodies. You can leave the subtle body here and go adopt, because he's an exalted personality. If we go to Vaikuntha Loka, he has assumed a spiritual body. So that aspect is there. Otherwise it just becomes, I'm sitting here in my physical body and my mind is entrapped in my physical body, and I'm mentally traveling to Australia or sun god or moon, wherever it is. So interplanetary systems does actually entail you that power to change the bodies, to make yourself suitable to appear on wherever the conceptual realm that you are in.
So that's common.
Body as in like it could be gross or subtle body, and sometimes it's even spiritual.
Okay. The other question is when
somebody is writing these questions, Mukharvind Prabhu. Oh, you are? Okay, sorry.
So I've created. Just one second. I just need to make an announcement about the questions. Yeah.
Yes.
So I have created a Google sheet and I posted that sheet on ISKCON General, and I am capturing all the questions that I can, but I might have missed a few.
Okay,
and I've copied you on that email as well.
Whatever so you can collect, that's very nice.
So Prabhu,
this one and final Manjula Kanta. Okay.
So when we are discussing about cosmology, so you discussed mostly about space, right? But the time aspect is not that much discussed as this. So is
third seminar.
So it's both space and time together.
We need new concepts for space and time. Without that, cosmology is not complete. We need space because we are seeing objects in space, celestial objects, right? So we need a new definition of space. But then these objects are moving. They're not stationary. They're causing different effects. So we need time. So we need a new concept of time.
Because when you introduced causality, so usually it is like some kind of time is there, like causing the effect.
Time is involved, yes. Time and space, they are coupled together. Yes, but we can conceptually we can discuss them separately. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Distance the sun time in sun moves over an atom, right? The calculation of time from the atom.
Yes.
Third canto. Yes. Okay, last question.
Prabhuji, when we talk about Vrindavan, we're always told that Vrindavan is actually a very big space.
Very big space?
It's actually much larger than you. You're not supposed to physically go to Vrindavan and measure it. It will not fit into your understanding of Vrindavan. So when we hear of Vrindavan, the Srimad Bhagavatam, it says so much, so big, so wide. And physically we don't see it. So is that an example of this concept of conceptual space? versus physical reality, physical space?
That's really an extreme example, I would say. Extreme in the sense, in a good sense. Because when we talk about Vrindavan, we're talking about something in the spiritual world. So right now, the concepts that we have covered so far are very much inside this material world.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So to make that connection, I think it's too far
to
go.
Okay.
Although, I mean, the point is valid, but I would make something closer to us.
So Prabhu, you've introduced us to the concept of physical versus conceptual. And then you had the other one, phenomenal versus...
You can read through this and see whether, we got something out of all these points.
Yeah. So you said reality is conceptual, not physical.
Mm-hmm.
From that we get the idea that we live in a world of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Existence of God is a scientific idea. You've explained that with a chart as to how that exists. We covered the Vedic Cosmology of 5th Canto with the conceptual map of the universe. You explained that concept. You also covered the concept of phenomenal versus noumenal. And then you went to the concept of the universe as a conceptual map in the form of an inverted tree.
Correct.
And you explained the concept of the roots and how the tree branches. And from there you went into the concept of origin of space where you talked about Shabda Brahman and also about the Lord being the original source of the creation. In between that you also covered the concept of structure in the tree.
Yeah.
And with that you combined yojana. So with origin of space you explained how we got the Nabhi Kamala and from the stem. That was a space that was given to create these planets. And from that, you started talking about yojana as in distance. You explained the difference between yojana as in a physical distance versus yojana in phenomenal distance versus yojana in conceptual, in conceptual ideas.
Right.
So we covered all of that and we ended with, what did we end with? That's it? With questions.
That's it. So that's it. So with yojana, now we are kind of ready to get into cosmology.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
It was
Vrindavan
a very nice one. A very nice
Thank you.
Thank you.
Prabhu, will you send us the slides? Will you send us the slides? Okay, that will be very helpful if you can send us the slides.
So we need to discuss that offline and we can schedule some time. So the next meeting is July 14th. We'll stick to that plan. So we'll see how much we can cover, but most likely we'll need one more day at least.
One last question. So when are you writing a book?